Right, let's have a look at one final example bit of writing in which we use our criteria carefully. Take a moment again to remind yourself of what is in the criteria and what it is required of you to get an A and a B on your report card. Origin, purpose, point of view. Being discerning rather than informed. Think about the subtle differences there. Sequencing with accuracy as well as detail. Look really carefully at whether or not you're being discerning, making careful choices of what goes in, or just being informed in the way you use information. Making sure you use terms. Making sure you apply the right concepts we've learned about in class. Thinking about where certain ideas can be applied to a new situation that you're not expecting. Ensuring that you've got extensive vocab. So try and push the limits a little bit. Don't just do what you always do. And so when you're seeing these examples I'm writing for you, I'm trying to show off the kind of language you might try and start using. Not just keep writing in the way you did a couple of years ago. Making sure that you've got correct spelling, punctuation, grammar. Making sure that you're looking at the way things change and the way things stay the same. Continuity and change. These can be applied in different questions in different ways. They hopefully can apply in your work. Look for opportunities. Think about the key events. What happened? What's the most important event here? What is, or who are, the key individuals? Who are the important individuals to spot? And think about who are the key groups to consider here. Think also, as I've got in a green box, about the style in which you are writing, and think also very carefully about proofreading. You'll need time in the exam to proofread, so plan for it. Manage your time carefully, even if you have to write times down on the paper and tick off as you go along. So here's the task I gave you in your OneNote. This is a pretty famous image, and I thought I might shake it up a little bit as I deal with this, also by looking at some other ones as well. We've already said we're looking for opportunities to talk about these things, but what we're looking at is Napoleon Bonaparte, painted in 1806. We've got this information given to us here. This is Napoleon I on his imperial throne. So this is Napoleon Bonaparte as emperor. An original version of Ingres's artwork is provided for you. And in some ways it's clearer. Notice the eagle on the ground, one of the symbols of ancient Roman Caesars. Look at the kind of clothing he's wearing, the demeanor on his face, that small laurel wreath crown rather than the spiky crown that we're used to seeing in later times. He's almost positioning himself, framing himself as a new Roman emperor, which is kind of an interesting portrait of him. Napoleon, remember, came to power as a general, a little bit like Julius Caesar did. He made himself dictator in a time of emergency, declared himself consul, a word used in ancient Rome for a dictator. And then he crowned himself emperor in a very famous artwork. And we'll have a look at the artworks around it. This is one famous artwork of Napoleon. Another is Napoleon the General, the man on horseback, the young, dynamic, go-get-'em, self-made man, painted by Louis David. Now, we've run across Louis David a few times before. Jacques Louis David, my mistake. Jacques Louis David. David painted the tennis court oath, and there's all the symbolism in that. He also painted the artwork you can see in the background of the crowning of Napoleon, and it's got Beyonce dancing in a film clip she did with Jay-Z. I've forgotten the name of it there. But a lot of people go to the Louvre to see this enormous artwork and these artworks of Napoleon. David also painted a very famous artwork of one of the leaders of the revolution, Marat, who was killed during the Reign of Terror. So there's some amazing artworks that came out of the French Revolution, and you can see many of them at the Louvre Museum in Paris. Make sure you get there. So let's now have a look at the paragraph I've written here that tries to attack the ideas of origins, perspectives, purposes, and context. And this time, I've left it blank for a little bit, and I want you to take a moment, hit pause, read what I've got there, think about it, maybe even highlight before it appears on the screen for you. Highlight, use a screen capture if you have to, the different bits. See if you can use the similar sort of language as you go. Pause now. Welcome back. Origins, the time and the place. I wonder if I could have said it's likely that the French artist Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres perhaps could have given away a location, but I think I've got a fair bit in there in terms of origins. I spotted this information, and there's quite a lot of it, as context. It's getting at important events, before and after. I've linked it to other artworks. I've got the Revolution of 1789 and 1806 in there, the time that the painting is done. I've got 1804, when Napoleon crowns himself emperor. I've brought in concepts like the divine right of kings. I've brought in other information that hopefully will help. I've even brought in the concept of third estate. In terms of perspective, I think this is an artwork in which Napoleon is very much being praised by Ingres. So, when we're looking at this artwork, I'm talking about how is he being praised? Well, it's the nobility of his look, the royal attire, all the trappings, the gold, the silver, the clothing he wears indicates power and prestige. By being painted with the crown and that type, and his particular look is very reminiscent of the kind of statues of Roman emperors. You could even argue how young Napoleon is made to look here, as if he is a boy king full of life, a whole future in front of him in France. It's pretty likely that Ingres and other artists are very sympathetic to Napoleon and are trying to flatter him because he's the new dictator. He's the new sun king, if you like. And then we're getting to purpose, and you can see how ideas link together. I suspect this artwork is an official portrait. It was paid for by Napoleon's government and people who liked him. It's a form of praise and flattery for Napoleon. I think if Napoleon didn't like it, this artwork would not have seen the light of day. It probably would have been destroyed. Perhaps it's a form of advertising, propaganda. It's making people to look at Napoleon and see him as legitimate, as a true monarch of France, even though he had once been a member of the Third Estate. It's equating him to not only the Roman emperors, but to Louis XIV, the Sun King himself. So I've tried to bring all of those ideas in to get origins, context, perspective, and purpose. And you can see hopefully how I'm talking about individuals and groups, bringing in concepts, details, and trying to use fairly sophisticated language. The trick is for you to now apply those same skills into the exam for yourself.